Marrying the ruthless billionaire who ruined my former lover's life was my only path forward after losing everything. Heartbreak doesn't begin to describe the soul-tearing agony of watching the alpha who promised me eternity look me dead in the eye and declare our mating bond a liability to his brand. The night my world ended, it smelled like rain cheap takeout and the unmistakable suffocating scent of amber and sandalwood. That was Tristan's scent. For 5 years it had been my sanctuary. We had met in college long before the designer suits and the paparazzi, back when he was just an ambitious theater major, and I was a timid Omega studying graphic design. We had formed a proto-bond, a deep intrinsic connection that meant we were destined to be fully mated. I remember the evening vividly. It was a Tuesday. I had spent the last of my weekly paycheck buying ingredients for a celebratory dinner. Tristan had just landed the lead role in a highly anticipated television drama produced by Zenith Entertainment. It was his big break, the moment we had spent half a decade starving and struggling for. When the front door of our cramped Los Angeles apartment clicked open, I didn't immediately notice the shift in the air. I rushed out of the kitchen, wiping my hands on my apron, the scent of honey and crushed mint, my own Omega pheromones, spiking with genuine excitement. "Tristan, I made the rosemary chicken you love and—" I froze. He was standing in the doorway, but he didn't look like my alpha. He was wearing a custom suit gifted by his new agency. His hair perfectly styled, his jaw clenched tight. The warmth that usually radiated from him, the invisible tether that connected his heart to mine, felt muted, cold. "Leo, sit down," he said. His voice lacked the familiar rumble that usually soothed my instincts. "What's wrong? Did the contract fall through?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. He walked past me, deliberately avoiding my touch, and stood by the window overlooking the smoggy city skyline. "The contract is fine. More than fine. My publicist, David Carmichael, finalized the details this afternoon. Zenith is pushing me as their new leading man. The campaign is going to be massive." "That's incredible," I breathed, taking a step toward him. Tristan held up a hand, stopping me in my tracks. His pheromones flared, sharp, dominant, and defensive. It physically pushed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. "David ran some focus groups. The demographic Zenith is targeting. They want fantasy. They want an eligible, unattached alpha, a lone wolf they can project themselves onto." I stared at him, the words tumbling around in my mind, but failing to form a cohesive picture. "Okay, so we keep our relationship quiet for a while. We've done that before. I don't mind staying in the shadows until you're established." "No, Leo, you aren't listening." Tristan finally turned to look at me, and the utter emptiness in his eyes terrified me. "A secret Omega is a liability. If the press finds out, if they smell your scent on me, it ruins the narrative. Zenith won't insure a $50 million production on an alpha who is tied down. My brand depends on my availability." The room started to spin. "Your brand, Tristan, we have a proto-bond. We've been together for 5 years. We were supposed to finalize the mating bite during my next heat." "I can't do it," he said, his voice terrifyingly steady. "I can't throw away my entire future for a high school romance that ran its course. I've already spoken to Dr. Harrison at the clinic. He prescribed me scent blockers and bond-severing suppressants." Bond-severing suppressants. The word struck me like a physical blow. Those drugs were highly controversial, designed to forcibly kill the neurological and biological connection between a mated pair. For an alpha, it was a heavy flu. For an omega, the receptive partner, it was pure agony. It was the biological equivalent of an amputation without anesthesia. "You're leaving me." My voice broke, a pathetic, wounded sound slipping past my lips. My Omega instincts were screaming, throwing my body into a panic. The bond in my chest, a warm, golden thread I had nurtured for years, began to thrash and burn. "It's just business, Leo. You have to understand," Tristan said, adjusting his expensive cuffs. He couldn't even look me in the eye anymore. "I've transferred $50,000 into your account. It's enough to cover the rent for a year and your medical bills while your body adjusts. Don't contact me again. My security team has been instructed to treat you as a fanatic if you show up at the studio." "Tristan, please," I begged, the dignity draining out of me as my knees gave out. I collapsed onto the cheap rug we had bought at a flea market, clutching my chest. The pain was immediate and blinding. The golden thread connecting us was stretching, fraying, snapping. He didn't kneel to help me. He didn't offer a comforting pheromone. He just picked up the leather duffel bag he had apparently packed earlier that day, stepped over my trembling body, and walked out the door. The sound of the latch clicking shut was the loudest thing I had ever heard. The next 3 weeks were a blur of hospitals, IV drips, and blinding pain. My body went into a severe rejection state. Dr. Harrison, the same doctor who had enabled Tristan's betrayal, diagnosed me with acute bond severance trauma. I lost 10 pounds. My hair lost its shine. My honey and mint scent turned sour, smelling like burnt sugar and wilted leaves. I was a broken Omega, discarded like trash because I didn't fit into the glossy, perfectly curated life of Hollywood's rising star. While I lay in a hospital bed, shivering through cold sweats, Tristan's face was plastered across every billboard in Los Angeles. He was the golden boy, the ultimate untouchable alpha. And I was nothing. 6 months. That's how long it took for me to stop crying every time I saw a movie poster. The $50,000 Tristan left me felt like blood money, so I donated it to an Omega shelter, packed up my life, and started over. I got a job working for Silvertray, catering a high-end service that catered to the Los Angeles elite. It paid the bills, kept me busy, and most importantly, required me to wear industrial-grade scent neutralizers. I didn't want any alpha smelling me. I wanted to be invisible. It was a brisk November evening, and we were working a massive charity gala at the luxurious Grand Orchid Hotel. The ballroom was a sea of crystal chandeliers, silk gowns, and suffocating egos. My job was simple: weave through the crowd, offer champagne, and remain entirely unnoticed. I was doing perfectly fine until the air in the room suddenly shifted. The heavy oppressive weight of dominant alpha pheromones rolled over the crowd. But it wasn't just one. It was a clash. I froze near a massive ice sculpture, my tray of flutes trembling in my hands. There, standing near the center of the room, surrounded by a flock of desperate executives and hungry journalists, was Tristan. He looked even more polished than before, a permanent arrogant smirk plastered on his face. Clinging to his arm was Oliver Reed, a stunning, famous Omega model, known for his perfect pedigree. My breath hitched. Despite the suppressants I took daily, a phantom pain lanced through the scar tissue of my broken bond. I felt dizzy, the overwhelming scent of amber and sandalwood mixing with Oliver's cloying jasmine. "Leo, you're pale. Go take a breather in the west corridor." My manager, a kind beta, named Sarah, whispered, gently taking the tray from my hands. I nodded numbly, turning on my heel and practically fleeing the ballroom. I pushed through the heavy velvet curtains and stumbled down the deserted west corridor, gasping for air. The panic attack was setting in. My chest felt tight, and tears pricked my eyes. I hated myself for still reacting to him. He had destroyed me, and yet my stupid biology still remembered him. I found a set of double mahogany doors slightly ajar and slipped inside, hoping to find an empty meeting room. Instead, I found myself in a dimly lit VIP lounge, smelling of rich leather, expensive bourbon, and something else. Thunderstorms, dark, bitter coffee. Ozone just before lightning strikes. It was an alpha scent, but unlike any I had ever encountered. It wasn't polished or controlled like the alphas in the ballroom. It was raw, unfiltered, wild. "Are you lost, little catering boy?" The voice was a deep, gravelly baritone that sent a sudden involuntary shiver down my spine. I spun around. Sitting in the shadows of a high-backed leather chair, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, was a man who commanded the room without even standing up. He wore a tuxedo, but the bow tie was undone, hanging loosely around his collar. His dark hair was slightly messy, his jaw covered in a faint shadow of stubble. His eyes, however, were what trapped me. They were a piercing, predatory steel grey. I recognized him instantly, and my blood ran cold. Arthur Pendleton. He was a billionaire venture capitalist who owned a massive conglomerate that practically controlled half the media and tech in the country. But in the Omegaverse tabloids, he was known as the feral billionaire. He was notoriously aggressive, refusing to take the social suppressants that high society alphas used to temper their instincts. He had ruined rival CEOs' dismantled studios overnight, and was rumored to be entirely unpredictable. No Omega dared approach him. His aura was too intense, too overwhelming. I apologize, Mr. Pendleton. I stammered, bowing my head respectfully, instinctively submitting to the sheer weight of his presence. I needed a moment. I'll leave. I turned to the door, but a sudden spike in his scent stopped me dead. It wasn't threatening, strangely enough. It was inquiring. "You're shaking," Arthur observed, his voice cutting through the silence of the room. I heard the clink of glass on a table, followed by the soft sound of his footsteps on the carpet. "And despite that chemical wash you're wearing, I can smell burnt honey. You're in distress." "It's nothing," I lied, keeping my eyes glued to the floor. "Just the crowd." Arthur stepped into the dim light, stopping mere inches from me. He was massive, standing at least 6'4", dwarfing my frame completely. He leaned in his nose, ghosting near the crook of my neck where my scent gland was located. I squeezed my eyes shut, expecting to be repulsed, expecting panic. Instead, the scent of the thunderstorm wrapped around me like a heavy protective blanket. The phantom pain in my chest instantly dulled. My breathing slowed. "A severed protobond," Arthur murmured, his voice rumbling in his chest. His intellect was as terrifying as his reputation. He deduced it just from the subtle nuances of my ruined scent. "Recent. Brutal. Let me guess. It was the peacock in the ballroom, Tristan Hayes." My head snapped up, my eyes wide with shock. "How did you—" A dark, dangerous smile curved Arthur's lips. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a wolf baring its teeth. "I own a 51% stake in Zenith Entertainment. I know everything about my investments. I know they ordered him to scrub his past, and I know he complied without hesitation. He's a coward." I swallowed hard, the tears I had been holding back, finally spilling over. Hearing someone else call Tristan out, hearing this terrifying, powerful man validate my pain, broke the dam inside me. "He left me," I whispered, the admission tasting like ash. "Because I wasn't good enough for his brand." Arthur reached out. I flinched, but his large, calloused hand gently tilted my chin up. His thumb brushed away a tear, the touch shockingly tender for a man known to be ruthless. "His brand is an illusion," Arthur said softly, his steel eyes locking onto mine. The feral, untamed energy rolling off him was suddenly focused entirely on me. And he is a fool. To break a bond with an Omega who smells like you. He doesn't deserve the empire Zenith is building for him. Arthur took a step back, the dangerous smile returning. He walked over to the desk, poured a fresh glass of bourbon, and turned back to me. "What is your name?" he asked. "Leo," I said, my voice barely a squeak. "Leo Montgomery." "Well, Leo Montgomery." Arthur Pendleton said, raising his glass in a mock toast. "I have a reputation for tearing down things that irritate me. Tristan Hayes irritates me, but outright firing him is bad for my stock portfolio. I need a more theatrical approach, something that ruins his untouchable alpha image while putting him firmly in his place." He walked slowly back toward me, the thunderstorm scent flaring, wrapping around me, intoxicating me. "Marry me, Leo." I stopped breathing. "What, marry me?" Arthur repeated, his eyes burning with a sudden, intense fire. "Let me bite you. Let me put my mark on that beautiful neck." We walk out into that ballroom, and we let Tristan Hayes and the rest of the world know that the Omega he discarded was just claimed by the man who holds his entire pathetic career in the palm of his hand. It was madness. It was absolute insanity. He was a feral, dangerous alpha I had just met, and I was a broken Omega catering his party. But as I looked into Arthur Pendleton's eyes, I didn't see danger. I saw vengeance. And for the first time in 6 months, I felt my shattered heart begin to beat again. I didn't say yes immediately. My mind was a chaotic whirlwind of fear, lingering heartbreak, and the intoxicating ozone-heavy scent of Arthur Pendleton. But as I stood in that dim VIP lounge, clutching my cheap catering uniform, I realized I had nothing left to lose. Tristan had already taken my dignity, my home, and my biological stability. "Okay," I whispered the word, barely carrying over the sound of my own erratic heartbeat. "Okay, let's ruin him." The next 48 hours were a masterclass in billionaire efficiency. Arthur didn't just take me away from the gala, he completely erased my old life. I was relocated to his sprawling, glass-walled penthouse in Century City. A team of elite private physicians, far above the pay grade of Tristan's shady clinic doctor, was brought in to manage my bond severance trauma. They didn't pump me full of suppressants. They gave me natural pheromone therapy. More importantly, Arthur gave me his scent. He wasn't like the refined, socially conditioned alphas of Hollywood. He didn't suppress his protective instincts. Whenever the phantom pains of Tristan's rejection flared up in my chest, making me gasp and double over, Arthur would drop whatever $1 million merger he was negotiating, pull me into his chest, and drape me in the heavy grounding scent of thunderstorms and dark coffee. His presence was a weighted blanket on my frayed nervous system. Our marriage was entirely a legal maneuver drawn up by ruthless corporate lawyers. I would play the role of his beloved Omega, and in return, I received a trust fund, absolute security, and a front-row seat to Tristan's downfall. The stage for our grand debut was set 3 weeks later at the Chateau Marmont. Zenith Entertainment was hosting a massive exclusive premiere party for Neon Gods, the television drama that Tristan had sacrificed our 5-year relationship to star in. The paparazzi were swarming, Sunset Boulevard flashing cameras, capturing every A-list celebrity and industry titan. I arrived in the back of Arthur's blacked-out Maybach, wearing a tailored midnight blue Tom Ford suit that clung to my waist perfectly. On my left ring finger rested a vintage Cartier Panther ring, heavy with emeralds, a clear territorial statement from the man sitting beside me. "Are you ready, Leo?" Arthur asked. His voice was a low rumble. He wasn't wearing his usual perfectly tailored tuxedo. His collar was unbuttoned, his tie discarded, projecting the untamed, feral image the media loved to fear. "I'm terrified," I admitted honestly. Arthur reached out his large, warm hand, cupping the back of my neck. His thumb brushed over my scent gland. He didn't bite me, not yet, but he deliberately rubbed his wrist against my neck, marking me with his dominant pheromones. "Tonight you are untouchable. Let them smell the storm." We stepped out of the car, and the world exploded in a barrage of blinding flashes. The moment the press recognized the notoriously reclusive, feral billionaire, the shouting reached a fever pitch. But when they saw me holding his arm, the air crackled with a different kind of electricity. We bypassed the press line and entered the courtyard of the Chateau Marmont. The party was in full swing, dripping in champagne and forced laughter. I spotted him almost immediately. Tristan was holding court near the main bar, looking like a flawless golden god. He was laughing at something a network executive said his arm wrapped loosely around Oliver Reed, the famous Omega model he was using for PR. As Arthur and I walked deeper into the courtyard, the heavy, unmasked scent of Arthur's alpha pheromones rolled through the crowd. Conversations died. Heads turned. People parted for Arthur like the Red Sea, terrified of his reputation. Tristan turned, his polished smile faltering. His eyes landed on Arthur, widening in shock and deference. Arthur owned 51% of his network after all. But then Tristan's gaze shifted to me. I watched the exact moment his brain short-circuited. He recognized the midnight blue suit, the newly healthy glow of my skin, and the defiant tilt of my chin. But it was the scent that hit him hardest. My honey and mint pheromones were blooming, completely intertwined with the dark, overwhelming ozone of Arthur Pendleton. "Leo," Tristan breathed, taking an involuntary step forward, dropping Oliver's arm entirely. Arthur stepped slightly in front of me, a physical shield. "Mr. Hayes," Arthur said, his voice carrying effortlessly over the sudden hush of the surrounding crowd. "I don't believe you've been formally introduced to my husband." The silence in the courtyard was deafening. I saw the network executives pale. I saw Oliver Reed's jaw drop. "Husband!" Tristan choked out his facade, cracking completely. His alpha instincts, the ones he tried so hard to suppress for the cameras, flared up in confusion and misplaced possessiveness. "Leo, what is this? What are you doing with him?" "Living my life." "Tristan," I said, my voice steady, surprising even myself. "You made it very clear that a secret Omega was a liability to your brand. Arthur disagrees." Tristan looked like he had been struck by lightning. The cameras inside the private party were already snapping. The untouchable lone wolf of Hollywood was standing in the middle of his own premiere, publicly losing his composure over the billionaire's new spouse. "This is a joke," Tristan hissed, stepping dangerously close, his amber scent turning burnt and aggressive. "Leo, you belong." A low, vibrating snarl ripped through the air. It wasn't a metaphor. It was a deeply primal feral sound vibrating from Arthur's chest. The sheer force of Arthur's aggressive pheromones hit Tristan so hard, the actor physically stumbled backward, clutching his chest. "Take another step toward my Omega," Arthur whispered, his steel-grey eyes completely black with blown-out pupils, "and I will ensure the only stage you ever perform on is a state penitentiary block. Enjoy your premiere, Hayes." Arthur placed his hand on the small of my back and guided me away, leaving a shattered, humiliated Tristan standing in the wreckage of his perfect public image. The aftermath of the Chateau Marmont party was apocalyptic. TMZ and the Hollywood Inquirer ran the story non-stop. The feral billionaire claims, Hollywood's hidden heartbreak. Tristan, desperate to save his sinking narrative, made a fatal mistake. He tried to play the victim. He leaked a fabricated story to a gossip blog, claiming that Arthur had used his corporate power to forcefully steal me away, framing himself as the tragic, heartbroken alpha who had his true love ripped from his arms by a ruthless tycoon. He severely underestimated Arthur Pendleton. Arthur didn't just fire Tristan, he systematically dismantled him. Using his controlling stake in Zenith Entertainment, Arthur invoked a rarely used morals and ethics clause in Tristan's contract. He didn't need to lie. He simply exposed the truth. Arthur's legal team subpoenaed the records from Dr. Harrison's clinic, leaking the fact that Tristan had utilized illegal, unconsented bond-severing suppressants to abandon his proto-mated Omega for a television role. In the Omegaverse, betraying a proto-bond for financial gain was a social death sentence. The public backlash was instantaneous and brutal. Oliver Reed publicly dropped Tristan the next morning, releasing a statement condemning his actions. Zenith Entertainment officially severed ties with him by noon, halting production on Neon Gods and recasting the lead. Brand deals from luxury watches to designer colognes evaporated in a matter of hours. Tristan's brand was dead. It all culminated on a rainy Tuesday, exactly 1 month after our fake marriage began. I was sitting in the massive library of Arthur's secluded Malibu estate, watching the rain batter the floor-to-ceiling windows. I felt a strange sense of closure. The revenge was complete. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the library slammed open. Tristan stood there, soaking wet, trembling, and looking completely unhinged. He had bypassed the front gate by scaling the sea wall. "Leo!" He screamed, his eyes wild, his amber scent reeking of desperation and sour fear. "Please, you have to tell them it was a lie. Tell the press we had a mutual breakup. I've lost everything. My house, my agent, my accounts are frozen." I stood up, wrapping my cashmere cardigan tighter around myself. I didn't feel panic. I just felt pity. "You did this to yourself, Tristan. You chose the brand." "I was stupid." He sobbed, falling to his knees on the Persian rug. "I'll take you back. We can finalize the bond. I'll be a good alpha to you, I swear." Before I could even process the audacity of his words, a shadow descended upon the room. Arthur had entered from the terrace, his eyes locked onto Tristan with the lethal intensity of a predator who had found a rat in its den. "You dare bring that pathetic stench into my home?" Arthur's voice was deathly quiet, but it commanded the very air in the room. Tristan scrambled backward, terrified. "This is between me and my Omega." Arthur lunged. It was a blur of motion. He hoisted Tristan off the floor by the lapels of his soaked jacket, slamming him against the mahogany bookshelves. Books tumbled to the floor. Arthur's feral nature was fully unleashed, his fangs elongating a raw, protective snarl tearing from his throat. He was going to kill him. "Arthur, stop!" I yelled. Arthur froze, his chest heaving, his dark eyes snapping to mine. He didn't let Tristan go, but he halted his violence, instantly yielding to my voice. I walked over my bare feet, silent on the floorboards. I looked at Tristan, the man I had loved for 5 years, the man who had discarded me like trash. "He's not your Omega," I said, my voice ringing with absolute unshakable certainty. "I am Leo Pendleton, and you are trespassing." I reached out and placed my hand gently over Arthur's tightly clenched fist. The moment my skin touched his, the feral tension bled out of him. Arthur dropped Tristan to the floor in a pathetic heap. "Security is waiting in the hall. Arthur told the trembling actor. "If I ever see your face on this coastline again, I will not be stopped. Get out!" Tristan scrambled out of the room without another word, a broken shell of a man. When the doors clicked shut, the heavy silence of the library returned, save for the rain lashing against the glass. I looked up at Arthur. His chest was still rising and falling rapidly, his eyes searching my face, expecting me to be horrified by the monster he had just shown me. "You told him you were a Pendleton," Arthur whispered, his voice rough. "The contract." "Burn the contract," I replied softly. I stepped fully into his space, wrapping my arms around his waist, burying my face in his chest. I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs with the scent of the thunderstorm. The golden thread in my chest, the one Tristan had brutally snapped, had woven itself back together. But it wasn't reaching for the past anymore. It was anchored firmly to the feral, terrifying, beautiful man holding me. Arthur's arms wrapped around me, crushing me to him. He buried his face in my neck, his lips brushing against my scent gland. "Are you sure, little catering boy?" he murmured, his breath hot against my skin. "Claim me," I whispered, tilting my head back, baring my neck to him completely. "Make it real." Arthur's fangs sank into my flesh. It wasn't pain. It was a blinding rush of light, a surge of warmth, and an overwhelming, absolute sense of belonging. The storm and the honey collided, fusing into something permanent and unbreakable. I had lost a hollow illusion of love, only to find a real, fierce devotion that would protect me against the world. That's the story of how my shattered heart found its true match in the most unexpected, terrifying storm. What would you have done if your alpha abandoned you for fame? Would you have taken the Billionaire's deal? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story made your heart race, hit that like button, share it with your pack, and don't forget to subscribe for more intense, real-life Omegaverse drama. Until next time, stay strong.